In this video, you're going to learn about user inputs and conditional statements in Python to create interactive programs. And keep watching till the end of the video because you're going to be able to create a simple game that applies everything you've learned. So let's get into it. Alright, the link to this code is going to be in the description below. And I highly encourage you to follow along because it's going to make it a lot easier for you to learn all the topics I'm going to be covering in this video. And so the first one is going to be user input. And the syntax for that is we say it's the variable name and we say it's equal to, and we're going to type in the input function. It's a built-in Python function. And inside this input function, you pass in whatever you want to be displayed onto the console. And so this is just an example. It says enter in the prompt here. And let me just show you an example first. So I'm going to follow this syntax over here. And so our variable name is going to be, I'm just going to say name. I'm going to say it's equal to input. And inside the parentheses, I'm going to say enter in your name. And once I run that, it's going to ask me in the console, it's going to show me, it's going to say enter in your name, and it's going to allow the user to type in whatever they want. And so that's the cool thing about user input. It lets the user type in whatever they want after they're given a prompt. And so it makes the program interactive, and you can do a lot with this because the user can interact with the program. There's so many different kinds of things you can do with this concept. And so for this prompt, I'm going to just say Dylan for the name and then say enter. And then once that happens, nothing happens after that because I didn't program anything afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say print, I'm going to say my name is, and then comma, I'm going to say name. This over here is string concatenation. I'm just combining this string with this string over here, or this variable, which stores a string. And now when I run that, and I say, it says enter in your name, and I'm going to say Dylan, and enter. Now it says my name is Dylan. And this is really powerful because this variable stores whatever the user typed in. And you could do a lot with that information. So for example, you could also, with the input function, you not only can store strings, you could also store integers. And so let's say I want to get the user's age. To do that, I can say age is equal to int and then input. And then I say enter in your age. And I have to wrap this around integer because it's going to convert this automatically. What is highlighted here, that automatically returns a string, but then this int over here is going to convert that into an integer because we want this variable to be an integer data type, not a string. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to say print my age is, and then we put in the age variable here, then click run, and enter in your age. I'm going to say 19, enter. Now that says my age is 19. And notice, if I did something else, let me show you. If I ran that again, it says enter in your age, and I say Dylan. Dylan is not a string, or Dylan is not an integer. So if I say that and then I click enter, then it's going to give me an error because it says invalid literal for int, because this age variable was expecting an integer value, not a string. So that's pretty useful. And we can do a lot with input. We can use this with conditions, and I'm going to be talking about that next. So in the previous video in this playlist, I talked about booleans, and if you've seen that, then you should know that a boolean is a data type that's either true or false. And this is important to know for conditional statements because a conditional statement is an expression that evaluates to a Boolean. So it's an expression that evaluates to either true or false. And there's 6 comparison operators you need to know when dealing with conditional statements. And that's the greater than equal to, or sorry, not greater than, less than equal to, greater than equal to. Sorry, I read that wrong. And then equal to, which is, in Python you need to do double equal signs, because if you only have one equal sign, that's basically assigning the value to a variable. But when dealing with conditional statements, we need 2 equal signs to check if they're equal to each other. And then the last one is not equals to each other, and that's the exclamation mark and the equal sign. And so let me show you some examples. I'm going to say, let's say 5 is equal to 5. And that's obviously true, right? So if I run that, it's going to return true. And same thing with, you're allowed to compare floats with integers. So you can say 5.0 is equal to 5. And because they're mathematically equivalent to each other, that's going to return also true. However, we can't, when we compare strings with numbers, they're not going to be the same because Python does not recognize this as a mathematical value. So if we do that, it's going to return false. And we can also do, we can say if they're not equal to each other, in this case it's true because the string of 5 is not equal to the integer of 5. And we can also do things like, is 10 plus 5, is it greater than 20? And 15 is not greater than 20. So if we run that, then that's going to be false. If we can say is 10 plus 5 less than or equal to 15. And because 10 plus 5 is 15, that's equal to 15, that's going to return true. So there's a lot of things. You can play around with this in your editor. You can play around with all the different comparison operators. And let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about these. And yeah, now we're going to move on to if statements, which directly uses the comparison operators. And so the syntax, how it works is we have an if condition, and inside the if condition, we're going to indent the code. So you can see there's a little space here. And then we can put whatever code we want in this line where you see my mouse. And that line of code is only going to be run if the condition over here is true. And if it's not true, then we're going to go down and keep looking. If there's an elif statement, which also stands for else if, and so elif, and then we put in another condition. If this new condition is true, then we're going to run the block of code that is indented inside that condition. And if it's not true, however, then we're going to go again, and it could either be an else statement again, or it could be an else statement. And if it's an else statement, we're going to run that block of code no matter what, because that block of code, whatever's inside the else statement, is going to be run if all the previous conditions were false. Okay, now let me show you one example on if statements before we move on to creating the game. So I'm going to go down here, and we're going to create a simple program that takes in a user input and checks if the number is even or odd. And it's going to return whether it's even or odd. And so I'm going to say num is equal to int input, and then I'm going to say please enter in a positive number, and then that's our prompt. And we got to make sure to convert it into an integer because we're expecting that the user input is an integer. And I also said positive here because I don't want to check negative numbers in this program. And so because I said positive, I got to make sure I do something with my if statements. So positive numbers are all numbers greater than 0. So if the number, I'm gonna write this down. We're gonna say if num is less than 0, then we're gonna print you entered an invalid number. Because we only want the program to take in positive numbers. We don't want negative numbers. So this is checking if it's a valid input or not. And else if, or elif, so now if we're on this part, that means that our input is valid because this condition here was false. So elif, the num mod 2, and remember how to check if a number is even or odd. You can check either one first. I'm gonna check if it's even, and so I'm gonna say num mod 2 is it equal to 0? And notice how I use double equal signs because I'm checking if they're equal to each other. I'm not assigning the value to the variable. And so if the num mod 2, if that value is equal to 0, then we're going to print out you entered, or your number was even. And then now I'm going to check the last case of when the number is odd. And so what we could do is we can say elif num mod 2 is equal to 1, and then print your number was odd. We can do that because we know that if we take a number and divide it by 2 and we get a remainder of 1, that means our number is odd. But we can also do something a bit cleaner. We can get rid of this and just say else. Because we know that if this condition is false, that means that our number is a valid input because it's positive. And if this condition is false, that means that the number was not even. So the only option left is that the number has to be odd. And so we can use this else statement because it's the last option. And let me run this to show you what it looks like. So it says, please enter in a positive number. And let's say 15. And 15 is an odd number, so let's see what it says. Okay, it says your number was odd. And that's good because that means we got our program is working correctly because 15 is odd. So that's good. And now I'm going to I'm going to run it again. And then I'm going to say -10. And this should return something else. And so what do you guys think this is going to return? Let me click enter. And it says you entered an invalid number because this is a negative number. And so we only wanted positive numbers. That's why it's saying that. And yeah, that's it for this short example. Let me know if you have any questions on it in the comments below before we move on to creating the game. Okay, now we're going to make the game, and it's going to be a simple number guessing game. And because we haven't covered loops or functions yet, we're going to be pretty limited in what we can do with this game, but we'll make it work. So we're going to use a built-in module in Python called random. And we're doing this because it gives us access to a function called randint. So let me show you how that works real quick. So I'm going to say import random. And this basically gives us access to all the functions provided by the module. And we're going to say secret is equal to random.randint. And then I'm going to pass it 1 and 10. And so what this randint function does is that it takes in 2 parameters and it gives you a random number. So this variable over here called secret, that's going to be a random number between 1 and 10. It's going to be random. It's going to be different every time you run this cell over here because it changes over time, or it changes each time. So this is going to be the correct number. This is going to be the number that we're trying to guess. And the guess, or the user input, is going to be, or we're going to ask it, please enter a number between 1 and 10. And so Now we're also going to convert this into an integer because we want this to be an integer. We don't want it to be a string. I'm going to say if we're going to use our conditional statements now. So we're going to say if the user gets the number right first try, then we're going to say you got it right. And that's the best case scenario where they get it right the first try. And we're also going to check if they get it wrong. So we're going to give them some hints. We're going to say if the guess is less than the secret, which means that if the user guesses a number that's lower than the actual number, then we're going to say your number was too low. And here's the thing, we're going to give them 2 tries in this game. So I'm going to copy and paste this and put it inside here. And so what this is doing is it's basically giving them another chance in guessing the number, because I have the input function here again. And so I'm going to say guess again, and I'm going to say if guess, and this is kind of what I did up over here. If the guess is equal to the secret, then we print you got it right. And if it's wrong, so we're going to say else, then we're going to print you got it wrong. The number was, and then we'll say the number was, we pass in secret. Okay, I hope that makes sense. What we're doing here is we're putting an if statement inside another if statement. And we're allowed to do this. This is called nested if conditions. And basically what this is doing is we're going to check this condition and run everything here. And these conditions are only going to be ran under this condition. So if you can stack as many if conditions as you want. You can put as many if statements as you want inside another if statement. It's just going to make the program a little bit more complex. This is the most we're going to do. We could add we could say over here, guess again. We can say int input. We can say guess again here. But that's going to make it a little bit more complex. So I'm not going to do that. We're going to leave it at 2 tries only in this game. And we're also going to check if the last condition we need to check is if the guess is greater than the secret. So we could do this, or we can say else. And I'm going to say else because it's shorter. And I'm going to say your number was too high. And this thing, everything that I pasted below here, that's exactly the same because they're just guessing again. So we don't really need to change anything there. And that's pretty much it for this game. It's pretty simple. We could have used loops, but I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to use loops because we didn't cover that yet. So I'm going to run this. We'll see how it works. And ask me, please enter a number between 1 and 10. So I'll just say 5 because, 5 is the middle. First guess. And it says, guess again. And it says over here, your number was too low. So that's the hint it's giving me. So let's see. So 5 was too low. Let me try guessing, 8. And I got it wrong. Okay, it was 7. Okay, let me try this again. I'm gonna do it one more time and see if I get it right. You should play around with this too. And let me know in the comments what your number was. Because it's different for everybody. So I'm gonna guess, I'll guess, 6. And this is my number's too high. Okay, let me guess. Let's say 4 maybe. I got it wrong. Okay, it was 3. I was 1 off again. But this is pretty cool, right? You're using the input function can do a lot. You can build games. You can do a lot of cool things. And using if conditions makes the program a lot more complex and a lot more interesting because there's a lot of things different things that you can now handle. Okay, I hope you learned something new in this video. If you want a refresher on Python variables, then click on this video over here. But if you feel like you're more of an experienced coder and you want more of a challenge, then click on this video over here on big O notations in Python. So hopefully I see you in one of those videos, and thank you guys so much for watching.